I don't have any slides. We're going to really just get practical with this idea of empathy building. And I'm going to take you through a really quick crash course, just in a practical tool and example that we use. But some biblical frameworks before we get into that. I really like, and this isn't just because it's a Christian thing, I have to use a verse. It really is an anchor. And I think I've been talking about it in Trigger circles for about 5 years, ever since it started. So it really is just kind of a consistent, it's kind of boring for the old guys that have been here. It's like, oh, Brandon's going to do this talk again. We've heard it 1,000 times. Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do because it works. We're reading the same Bible that we have for 2,000 years, so it'll be okay. So I like to anchor on this idea as we're quoting Paul again, bending the arc of history back to the new creation. The original creation was great. There was nothing wrong with it. We broke it, right? So Genesis 1:28, God blessed them, and he said to them, them is man and woman. They're not named yet. Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of heaven and every living creature that moves on the earth. He gave us everything to go and work and cultivate. This was before sin. Sin happened in Genesis 3. We're reading from Genesis 1. Before there was sin, we had work to do. Before there was sin, we were going to be interacting with humans and turning chaos into order and building a garden in the wilderness. So we were going to be doing all the things that we are doing. They just probably wouldn't look like they're broken like we do now. There might be certain industries that wouldn't be necessary. I don't really know what that is because there's been thousands of years of it being broken, so I can't project what it could have looked like. But it would have been fun and pleasant and easy, and interpersonal relationships would have reflected God's character as he created us as his image bearers. But unfortunately, it's not. But anchoring on this Genesis 1, there was going to be work to do, and we were going to have businesses, and technology was going to happen, and science was going to be a thing. Cloning sheep was probably going to be a thing. God's not surprised by these things. He created science to do a lot of the crazy stuff that science is doing. Another anchor verse. The time's ticking fast. Another anchor verse for me, Jeremiah 29, not 11. I know the plans I have for you prosper and all that stuff. 4, starting in 4 to 7. I won't read it, but you can just kind of go there or make a note of it or whatever. So God, through Jeremiah, is talking to Israel, and Jeremiah is the prophet, and his message to the nation of Israel there was, I'm going to send you, or I have sent you into exile. There was a siege laid by Babylon onto Jerusalem, and they captured people as slaves and killed a lot of people and took them back to Babylon. That sounds really terrible. Why would God do that? And he tells us. So he said, I sent you into exile. This is my design. You're going to be there for a while. Build houses, plant gardens, take wives, take husbands, have children, give them as wives and husbands. Seek the welfare of the city that I've called you into, for in its welfare you will find yours. And I think that gets back a lot to what Peter was saying and what he goes into Mergon every day as that kind of being his motto. How can I let my light shine? And this is, the call in this is a proactive way to shine your light, not an accidental way, or maybe a less negative, a reactive way. It's not accidentally, I'm going to shine my light and people are going to get saved. If we're not intentional, and if we don't worship God, the rocks will cry out, and he will force that to happen. So he's not unable to bring people to salvation outside of us. He's chosen to use us as his instruments of salvation, and even in your business. Even as you seek profit in your business. So those are the anchors that kind of drive what I do, how I live my life. I manage the spin-out portfolio at Stellenbosch University, and that anchors how we engage with the 25 companies that we work with there in the spin-out companies and other workshops that we do with other companies there in the launch lab. This, with the team now, this anchors how and why we do the things with the companies that we do. What is their need? So how we practically try to do that, and this is one way that we do it, and hopefully it'll give you a little bit of an idea. of how you could maybe apply it, use different tools, but the idea is that you're proactive in meeting the needs of the stakeholders, customers, people, users, whatever, of your product or service, being proactive with meeting their needs, and then responsive proactively over time as those needs change and shift. You need to tweak your offering and what you do for them. Where we start, there's one tool that we use. So I'm going to use the whiteboard here. I think they're recording it, so if you're like way on the corners, I'm sorry. I'm going to kind of play around this thing. One tool that we use it's a very simple tool. It's not very profound. Just a day in the life of a person. So we start with what is the kind of overarching thing that we're trying to do? There's a problem we're trying to solve. And if you don't understand the problem you're trying to solve, this kind of breaks down. So try to get that problem done. And I'm going to use a Trigger alumni, Ventures alumni, as an example because it's a really helpful one for me to be able to relate it to something that's easy for everyone to understand. And it's Quali Health. Intabi Singh was in the 2019 cohort, and this is her business. It's shifted and updated, it's pivoted a few times, especially with COVID and all that. But the original, I think it probably still is the same vision. And this is my problem statement that I put on it. It's not hers that she might put in a pitch deck. So if I'm different from what Intabi Singh would say, these are my words, not hers, because it's probably better than this. But her problem that she's trying to solve is to provide quality and affordable private health care for the mass market and end preventable deaths. And she has a personal story of her uncle who had a disease that was very preventable, but because of brokenness in the healthcare system, he unfortunately died. And that sparked her to start this business, Quali Health. So if I'm thinking of that, I have the problem statement, and I think of an individual that's in that system, in the mass market. I'm trying to provide quality and affordable private health care for the mass market because there's certain things with government health care that sometimes don't work as efficiently as they could due to various factors. I'm not here to give a commentary on some of those things. This is Intabi Singh's business. So then what do you do with her uncle? Take her uncle, for example. You get into a day in the life of her uncle and view it through the lens of this context. So her uncle, when does he start his day? I start my day at 6 o'clock if I'm exercising before work, maybe 7 o'clock. So I'll wake up, I'll have breakfast. But in Intabi Singh's uncle, it's very different. And you have to get into that whole day in the life of to unpack what that is. Intabi Singh's uncle probably woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning because he had to walk 45 minutes to catch a taxi at 5 o'clock after he washed and maybe had coffee and a rusk. He got to the taxi by 5 o'clock, traveled for 2 hours to be at work at 7 o'clock. So you're unpacking his normal day of how things work. And you kind of see that 4, 5, 6 o'clock. What happens in each of those time blocks? And what we do is we put in a big table, bracket out, normally 6 or 7 o'clock. I work with a lot of tech companies, so we have a different audience that we're talking to. But for Quali Health, 4 o'clock is when their audience, their life probably starts. What happens 4 to 5? What happens from 5 to 6? What happens from 6 to 7? And get into that, not just the practical tasks that Intabi Singh's uncle is doing, but how does he feel? What are some of the realities around that? What's hard? What's easy? What's pleasant? On the walk to the taxi, he has friends, and they chat about Pirates losing to Stellenbosch FC the previous night, or something like that. That'll be 2 Mondays' time, because the opener for the PSL, Pirates Stellenbosch, is here, and we are going to beat them. Thank you very much. Any Pirates fans? Sorry. So they talk about those things. So what are the things that he enjoys doing in that stuff too? So not just the bad, it's not all problems, but paint the whole picture of what's there, because then you get the whole view of the person, because we want to know the person. We want to be proactive of him as an image bearer of God, and how do we serve him and intercept him in his life so that our light can shine before him and remove barriers for the gospel to penetrate his heart. And one of those, and in this business, one way that we can try to do that is to bring him decent health care when he's sick. So you've gone through that day in the life of, and then what we do with our companies and how we take them through things is we use a value proposition canvas. Is that familiar to people? And Triga people, you're cheating if you've been around for a little while, so don't answer. But for the Academy guys, the business model canvas, I think most people know. The value proposition is a subset of that, and it zooms in on the far right-hand side, the customer segments, and the middle section, that's the value proposition. So the value proposition canvas looks at those two things, and it tries to map your value with the jobs to be done of that customer, of that user. So this is the way we try to map it out. We look at first the customer because it's human-centered. We're building empathy with the person, and thank you. We're building empathy with the human. So I've gone through that hour, a day in the life of, every hour, what's happening there, and we use a circle, and there's 3 segments to the circle. There's a circle here, and I've cut it into thirds for the people on the edges. And this one that we try to define is the jobs to be done. What are the jobs to be done to meet the need of Intabe Seng's uncle in that context, okay? And if I think of the jobs that he's needing to do because he's sick, he needs to see a doctor. I'm not going to write all these down. Feel free to. But he needs to see a doctor because he's sick. He needs to get medication. He needs to get better. He needs to get to the doctor. He needs to see them, but he needs to know where to go and then actually physically get to the doctor. He needs to get home from the doctor. He needs to pay for the medication, okay? He can't just get it. There has to be a transaction to get the medication. That's a very simple list of the jobs to be done. But we've gone through that whole hour-long life, a day in the life of Uncle, and now that's what he needs to do because he's sick, because we're solving that problem of providing quality and affordable health care for the mass market and end preventable deaths, right? So that's the jobs to be done. You want to understand the gains of what would make doing those jobs easier, better, great, enjoyable even. And you want to understand the pains that Uncle goes through to get those jobs done. So start with the pains because those are a lot easier. What's a pain for Uncle to try to do those jobs? It's far to travel. We already talked about the normal day in the life of, it's a 2-hour taxi ride and never mind the 45-minute walk there. So if you've gone through that exercise of what's a normal day in the life of Uncle like, you can start to paint the whole picture and get out of just your building of what do we do when they walk in the front door? Because we're treating the whole image bearer of God, right? It's far to travel. It's a long wait, normally, in the healthcare system, even in private healthcare. At the Mediclinic that you drove past to get here, it's still a long wait most of the time. You're absent from work. And normally, with that market of patient, absence from work means no pay. That's another problem. I don't get the medication there often. I have to go out, or they're out of stock. I have to travel another half an hour, get another taxi to go find the medication because they're out of stock at the place that I'm sitting at, or they don't offer it to begin with. Sometimes I don't get better. I go to the doctor, I've taken a day or a half a day out of work, I haven't been paid. I go, and 7 days later, I still have the same sickness. It's expensive if I do have to pay. If I go to a normal private healthcare provider and not the government, it's still going to be the same wait time, but then it's more expensive. And then there's delays otherwise in the system. I get there, and then other people get triaged ahead of me because I just have the flu or pneumonia and someone else's leg is falling off or something. So those are the pains that Uncle will experience in trying to solve this problem. Quickly to the gains. What would be amazing is if I could go to the doctor and get my meds in the same place. That would be amazing. That would change my world. That saves me 20 Rand in the taxi to go pay for the meds in another location. If I could have something in my neighborhood, because how often is the medical clinic in the neighborhood of Uncle in the mass market? Not very often. Maybe on the outskirts, but it's not really close and easy to get to. What if I could have one in my area? Or what if it could be one taxi ride away or something like that, and position it in places like that? From there, so that's we do this, what are the jobs? Then we unpack the pains and unpack the gains that Uncle would probably pay for. What Uncle would definitely use. What would change Uncle's life? What would make this actually an enjoyable experience, or at least not a terrible experience for Uncle to go through, and maybe he would pay us. We're at least trying to deliver value. And in the value proposition side, so the circle, we put it on the right, and only after we've looked at the human and what their day looks like and what are the jobs that he needs to do or she needs to do, what are the pains that they experience, what are the gains that they would like to experience, only after we've done that work do we think about, okay, now what do we offer? We know we're trying to do quality healthcare and affordable that stops preventable deaths. So now we look at what is our value proposition. And then we think, we had the gains, so what creates the gains? What are the gain creators and pain relievers for those problems, right? Only after you've identified the pains, and then before we've even gotten to the products and services, what could relieve that pain for the uncle? And if I could have a one-stop shop, if he's looking for that, if that's a gain that he's looking for, how could I have a one-stop shop? How could I have low travel? How could I position it in his area? Then you map out what are those gain creators and what relieves the pain that I could possibly offer that Uncle would pay for, that would be of value to Uncle. Then I'll get into the products and services only after you've got the gains, and that leads into this, the pains lead into that. Both of these, you take that, and then you think about, okay, now what do I offer? What is the offering that I put out there, and what's the right price point for that to make sure I can cover my costs and maybe make a little bit of profit at the end of the day? And a few value propositions for Intabi Singh. There's one doctor, many nurses. You have to have a doctor, but a lot of nurses can do kind of the normal day-to-day stuff. So they reduce the costs for themselves of hiring doctors everywhere. If I go to the Stelcor clinic here, they have 8 doctors. That's dang expensive. But at Quality Health, you have one doctor, and a lot of nurses and sisters, they do all of the normal kind of day-to-day work, so you can reduce the cost for the patient by doing that. One fee for the doctor and medication. That's what they offer. It's a flat rate. I'm going to make up a number, 350 Rand. One fee, you see the doctor, 15 minutes, you get your medication, and you're gone. A 7-day healthy guarantee. If you are not better in 7 days, come back, no cost. We'll see you again and figure out what meds were wrong. Efficient service, software systems that make sure the services are efficient, that your wait time is reduced, so that you're not taking unnecessary hours out of work and away from family. Locating it in townships or at the outskirts of townships so people don't have to travel unnecessarily far to get to the services. And partnerships with hospitals that they've sorted out so that when there are referrals needed for more serious things that they uncover, they can triage those people to other hospitals where they can be treated with whatever medical aid or government hospitals or whatever. That's a really quick crash course. I think the main thing there to take away, that's an example of what we do with startups that we work with, to force us to think about the image bearer of God that's at the other end of that. How do we meet the needs of that image bearer, just like us? How do we meet those needs in such a way that does shine our light before them, that delivers value that they'll pay for, but it's not exploitive? You can see in that example that it's honoring. What do they need? And yes, 350 Rand, it's not nothing, and we're still going to make a profit, but it's value to that person. People will pay for value that acknowledges their image bearingness of God.